So I encourage you to play around with this, experiment, maybe as a challenge, try to write sample data that alternates so that the feed looks like a mix of different users. But it's working now. This is a working social microblogging site. So let's make a commit to that effect. Made a working feed. And at this point, as usual, we can check out the master branch. Let's merge in the changes. Then we can, actually, it's always a good idea before doing any pushes or anything to do a paranoid test, suite passing. So it'll work. I'm confident. There we go. And now let's push it up to Heroku. Actually, let's push it up to GitHub and Heroku in one step. And we'll have to rake the migration on Heroku as well. So let's do Heroku rake db migrate. You can see that it added the relationships table, and let's go take a look. There we go, and it's working. Let's take a look at the users. Do we have any other users? We have Fabrizio. Wow, who's on the ball. I don't even know who this is, actually. Let's follow Fabrizio. There we go. Let's take a look at home. Fabrizio hasn't made any micro posts, but it's working. This is amazing. We actually have a working social microblogging site on the live web at railstutorial.heroku.com. Now, of course, there are lots of more things we could do with this application, but we've come really far. With the addition of the status feed, we've finished the core sample application, and we've covered almost all the major features of Rails. We've had models, views, controllers, templates, partials, filters, validations, active record callbacks. We covered has many and belongs to. In this lesson, we covered has many through associations. We've talked about security. We've done a whole lot of testing, and we've also covered deployment. Since there's still a lot to learn about Rails, I'd like to give you some suggestions about where to find further information. The Ruby on Rails tutorial book lists some possible extensions to the sample application, and these additional sources are probably good places to look. So one of the things you could do here is add the ability to do @replies, which is something that Twitter supports. Twitter also has direct messaging. That would be cool to add. It would be nice to add follower notifications. This involves sending email through Rails, which is a fairly advanced topic, and it's changed completely in Rails 3. So that would be a great project to do, to notify users when someone else has started following them. Another email-related addition would be to have a password reminder. You can note that if you sign out here and if you try to sign in but you don't remember your password, you're pretty much out of luck at this point. It's also nice on many websites to have a sign-up confirmation step where you sign up and then you get an email asking you to click a link that then verifies that in fact you wanted to sign up. When you have a feed of microposts, it's also natural to have some sort of RSS feed, and Rails is certainly good at generating RSS feeds. Finally, if you go to this /users URL, you can get a list of all the users, but currently this is the only way to find users in our database. We do not have any sort of search functionality. So there are several ways to implement that, and I encourage you to look into search. It's a big subject, though. There's a lot to learn about search, and among other things, there are a lot of different ways to do it. So when looking to solve these sorts of really challenging exercises, I encourage you to look first and foremost at this site, which you may very well know about already. So Railscast is just an amazing resource. The creator of Railscast, Ryan Bates, he's some sort of machine, man. He makes one of these every week. It's just it's unbelievable. So these are free. It says right here, free Ruby on Rails screencasts. And I believe that pretty much anytime you're doing anything in Rails, the algorithm should be See if there's a Railscast on it already. I actually don't like this URL as much as I like this one here. This is the archive. So it's just an amazing wealth of resources. Part of the motivation for the Ruby on Rails tutorial screencast series and the Rails tutorial book as well was looking at the unbelievable quantity and quality of information here and realizing that there was no path into it, that there wasn't anything out there that really took you from zero up to the point where you could consume these resources, because the Railscasts are really quite advanced. I mean, even the intermediate stuff pushes me to the limit on occasion. And in the same vein as Railscast, I'd like to mention Peepcode. Peepcode is not Rails specific, but it started off with a lot of Rails stuff and still has a whole bunch of Rails screencasts. This was also a motivation for the Rails tutorial project, because there's just so much here, but there's nothing that really takes you from zero to basically knowing Rails. I mean, you can see here there's like Rails 2 from scratch, part 2, but it's like, maybe a few hours of, 81 minutes for the second one. I think the first one's about the same. So it's probably less than 3 hours of screencast total. Yeah, the first one's 76 minutes. So we're talking about less than 3 hours of screencasts. And as you can tell from this screencast series, there's tons of information. I mean, I've left out all kinds of stuff, and this screencast series is already pretty long. I'd also like to mention Scaling Rails. This is a series of scaling screencasts. We've hardly talked about scaling in this screencast series. Scaling is a huge topic just by itself. We've mentioned a few things, and a lot of the worst performance bottlenecks have been factored out of the framework, in the sense that it used to be you could really shoot yourself in the foot with Rails quite easily, but with Rails 2 and especially with Rails 3, it's hard to write really horrible code. But I still recommend looking at the Scaling Rails screencasts, and also look at some of the scaling subjects in the Railscasts episodes. Finally, it's a great idea to learn some more about the Rails framework in depth, and also learn about Ruby. So let me recommend a few things here. This is the Rails 3 way, which at this moment is in preparation, but I'm sure it's going to be a great reference, as was the original Rails way. I really think of this as a companion volume. The Ruby on Rails 3 tutorial is part of the same Addison Wesley Professional Ruby series as the Rails 3 way. And in this same vein, I recommend the Ruby Way, 3rd edition by Hal Fulton. This is also not out as of this moment, but this is a wonderful treatment of all kinds of different programming topics in Ruby. It essentially shows how to solve a huge number of concrete problems using Ruby, and it's just a great way to learn Ruby. And I've mentioned previously in the screencast series a couple other books. I mentioned Beginning Ruby and The Well-Grounded Rubyist. So Beginning Ruby by Peter Cooper and The Well-Grounded Rubyist by David A. Black are both excellent Ruby books. They're quite different in their approach, but they're both really good resources. Congratulations on finishing the Ruby on Rails tutorial screencast series. I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed producing it, and more than anything, I hope you've learned a lot. Good luck with all the dynamic web applications that I hope are in your future.